I'm Kyle Malnati, your host of the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. At Calibrate, we exist to help people create generational wealth through real estate. My personal mission is to encourage, empower, and educate you by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to episode 152 of the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati. Back-to-back episodes with Mike Michalowicz, author of Fix This Next, author of Profit First, Clockwork, The Pumpkin Plan, Surge, Toilet Paper Entrepreneur. 6 books are over my shoulder. Mike was gracious enough to give us 2 back-to-back episodes, so you are in for a real treat this holiday season. Speaking of treat, we're doing this giveaway. Before I have Mike on, I want to make sure you know that if you are rating, if you're liking, if you're subscribing, if you are most importantly sharing on Instagram and Facebook, we're keeping track of that. If you do a rating, make sure that you put some sort of identifier and send to info@calibratere.com, making sure that we know that that gets attributed to you. We want to give away an entire set, all 6 of Mike's books. If you're watching on YouTube, they're right over my right-hand shoulder. I've assembled them all. I'm going to give that grand prize to one very, very lucky listener on Apple Podcasts here. Then we have 3, count them, 3 Fix This Next books to give away. That's going to be really cool for 3 runners up. And thanks so much for anybody that's out there sharing it. Okay. You know this from the last episode, but I'm going to say it again. Mike Michalowicz has built 4, count them, 4 multi-million-dollar companies. He sold 1 to a Fortune 500 company, sold another to private equity, and maintains a controlling interest in the others. Mike has also experienced 10 failed businesses and the loss of his entire fortune twice. His intense experiences have driven Mike to be an author who radically simplifies the business owner's journey. Like I said, he's the author of 6 books, 6 incredible books. Perennially best-selling books, Profit First, Pumpkin Plan, and Clockwork are some of the most popular. He's a former small business columnist for the Wall Street Journal and a former business makeover specialist on MSNBC. Mike is also a world-renowned keynote speaker and hosts Entrepreneurship Elevated, a popular podcast for entrepreneurs. You can connect with Mike at www.mikemichalowicz.com. Again, that's mikemichalowicz.com. Enjoy episode 152 with Mike Michalowicz. Mike, thanks for joining us again. Back-to-back episodes, so much fun. We're talking about Profit First, which was an entire book. Love the book. Critically acclaimed. So many people. This is how I got introduced to you. Why is your CPA, your P&L, and GAAP, generally accepted accounting practices, why are all those things wrong?
Yeah, so they're logically, they make sense, but they fail almost all entrepreneurs. There was a study that came out of US Bank and the SBA collectively, and they identified that of the 300 million small businesses identified by the SBA as a company that does $25 million in annual revenue or less. That's my company. That's a lot of companies. Of the 300 million of us, 83% are in check-to-check survival. 83% don't have enough money today to pay the bills tomorrow unless substantial sales come in. So it's constant panic to sell. The foundational formula is sales minus expenses equals profit. We are told that profit comes last. We call it the bottom line at the year end. All those things mean it can be ignored for now. So profit is a last consideration. You would never say, I love my friends so much, I put them last. No, you love your friends, you put them first. If your health matters, your health comes first, not last. Well, we're told profit comes last. And that's why GAAP fails us. That's why traditional accounting fails us. What I teach in Profit First is just flip the formula. Sales minus profit equals expenses. In execution, every time revenue comes in our firm, we take a predetermined percentage of that money, hide it away from the business, hide away from our real estate practice, run the business off the remainder, but the profit accumulates on the side. It's the pay yourself first principle applied to our business.
The ironic thing is I was reading Profit First and finished that earlier this year is that you shared that the reason why Profit First was born was because of success, actually. It was the day that you received a check for $388,000. It was the first of several checks from the sale of your second business. And there's the story of the Land Rover, where you wanted not the best, not the safest, but the most expensive.
Yeah.
And then Keith, your accountant, called. And then most importantly, I want to share that story about your daughter. And I hope I pronounce it right, Adela. Excuse me.
Oh, we nailed it. It's Adela. It's a doozy. Adela.
Adela.
So yeah, so the story is this. I sold some businesses and living under the old formula. I thought profit was an event. And what I'm teaching is profit's not an event. Profit is a habit. We need to bake it into every transaction. But I grew these businesses. They were struggling profitability wise, but I sold them and I made my money. And I admittedly I became a dick. I was like, oh, but I need the expensive cars. I need the big house. I got to join the club. I evaporated wealth, all my wealth so quickly. I'm ashamed and embarrassed about it. Keith, my accountant, calls me February 14th. I'll never forget, 2008. It says, Mike, you should declare bankruptcy, or alternatively, you got a few assets left, like that house, liquidate what you got because you're done. I chose option 2. I liquidated, and I had to come home to my family on Valentine's Day. We usually have dinner together. It was sitting there. I was sobbing when I came in. The food ultimately was cold as I'm telling them we're losing everything. My daughter, Adela, she was 9 years old at the time. I told her she couldn't even go to horseback riding lessons. I couldn't afford it. She ran out of the room, and I thought she was running away from me. She ran to her bedroom to grab her piggy bank, and she ran back to me, and she goes, Daddy, since you can't provide for our family, I'll do it. And I just think about it now, I'm getting emotional. It is that moment is so wired in my head that my final breath on our plan, I know, is going to be remembering that second. That became the seed for change. It wasn't like, by the way, the next morning I woke up and said, I've got this. I went through depression and struggled, but I realized that the foundational formula we've been using of profit coming last wasn't serving me, wasn't serving any entrepreneur. And that was the impetus for creating a system that works with who we are naturally and ensures permanent profitability.
Mike, the realtors that listen to Calibrate Real Estate, they're growth junkies, frankly. And I think that one of the most important questions to answer, and it was a journey that I went through because growth's our battle cry. If I set aside my profits, how will I grow?
Right. Everyone's like, I gotta grow bigger and bigger. Here's the amazing thing. We have over 350,000 implementations of Profit First. There's a lot of companies doing it. There's major agencies, real estate agencies that have adopted Profit First. So it works in real estate. Here's what we found, which is fascinating. The businesses that take their profit first consistently are outpacing the industry standard in growth. They're growing faster than their competition, which blew my mind because everyone says it takes money to make money. Be very careful, by the way, of these established axioms that takes money to make money, that profit comes last. Maybe it's not true. The funny thing is it doesn't take money to make money. It takes innovation to make money. It takes out of the box thinking. It takes challenging the industry norms and standards. When these businesses were moving money to a profit and they had less money to spend, they became more selective. Kind of like we talked about in the last podcast, you were guided through, I think it was entrepreneurial leadership, what's working, what needs to be improved. Well, when we take our profit out first and there's less money to spend, we have to identify what's working to focus our money there. We can't take pot shots anymore. So these business owners became much more acutely aware of where to use their money. Plus, they started changing the rules of the game. I know agent, just to give you an example, so I can't run all those ads and stuff. We got to run in the newspaper every week and send out the flyers and stuff. That's expensive. She goes, what if I start doing videos? What if I interview the fire chief, school principal, the police chief? What if I start becoming the town journalist, the town reporter? Now, when people are Googling, hey, I want to move into, we live in a town called Boonton. I want to move into Boonton. Now they have the number one real estate agent is the one who's the journalist. She gets seen all the time. She elevated up her marketing so much. That's how she became the number one real estate agent in our town. So she repositioned herself because she took profit first and then couldn't do it the way everyone else does it. It caused innovation. She grew faster, a lot faster.
A gift that I want to share with our podcast audience is that Profit First is an entire book, but if you read Mike's newest book, Fix This Next, which we talked about in our last podcast, there are 5 needs to create permanent profit. 1 is debt eradication, 2, margin health, 3, transaction frequency, 4, profitable leverage, and 5 cash reserves. Go get the book. It's all in there. Mike, I've got 2 final questions that I ask all of my guests. You ready for them? Rapid fire?
Yes.
Okay. So first question is this idea of Dear Younger Me. It comes from a song that I really like by the band Mercy Me. And I've asked this to every single one of my podcast guests. So if you had to write yourself a letter, now that you've lived some life, now that you've had successful sales of businesses, bumps and bruises from trying to figure things out iteratively, you've been calibrating, what's the advice you wish you knew when you're 22? Or when you're signing, autographing one of your 6 books for a 22-year-old as you're doing a book launch or something, what's the question that they ask you most common that you give to those 22-year-olds?
Yeah, I probably would say to myself, to my younger self, don't follow the money, follow the heart, because behind that comes the money and support and all that stuff. But that's definitely the sequence. It's what are you called to do? Lean into it. It brings about joy and so forth, and it will bring about money for sustainability and to perpetuate it. Follow the heart for sure.
Last question of our interview, and this is a touching one. A lot of people know that this is something really important to me personally. Both of us have interacted with a guy named Chris Oakley, who tragically passed away last year in a hunting accident. And Chris interviewed you about one of your books, Clockwork, which is on the shelf here behind me. And Chris, when he answered that question, he was in episode 5 of this podcast, and we're now at episode 152. Chris shared that he was in a mentoring group in his 20s. They were required to read a book by Andy Stanley called The Principle of the Path. In that book, Andy Stanley has his audience write their own obituary. And that drove Chris for the next 10 years to achieving amazing heights, working for Dave Ramsey, having his own coaching company. So I'd like to reflect this on legacy. If you had one of your cherished family members deliver your eulogy, what do you want to be known for at the end of your life, Mike?
He eradicated entrepreneurial poverty. That's my life's purpose. And I realize I may not be able to have the breadth of impact that I need to have, but at least I can be a catalyst to make that happen. That entrepreneurs no longer struggle to achieve a dream. They have a pathway to make that dream a reality, because that supports our economy. It supports our globe. This is the guy who eradicated entrepreneurial poverty. That's what I want to have.
It's an amazing mission. Thank you. Wow. Oh my gosh. We had such an amazing discussion with Mike Michalowicz 2 weeks in a row. Such a huge blessing. I am thankful. I'm so thankful for Mike. So thankful for this time of year. So thankful for you, our podcast audience. Whether you download us as you're walking to your commute from your bedroom down to your home office in the basement right now, if you're on a run, if you're getting some needed exercise during this time, I just so appreciate you. I very much appreciate your download. So again, Mike Michalowicz, we're doing this big giveaway. We'll have that open here probably until the end of the month is what our goal is going to be. And then our podcast producer, Kayla Davis, and myself, we're going to get together. We're going to talk this through with our other teammate, Ann Russell, and we're going to pick the best 4, the most 4 raving fans that are out there sharing this content for the grand prize, all 6 of Mike's books. And then the runner-up prizes are going to be 3 of the most recent book. So you just heard Mike talk about Profit First and Fix This Next. Profit First, an entire book dedicated to that process. And what Mike has allowed me to do, and I asked him permission, got to get credit where credit is due, of course. Portfolio Penguin is the publisher. Portfolio Penguin, the publisher, go buy Profit First. Buy it in hardback, buy it on Amazon, buy it on barnesandnobles.com. Those are the 2 areas, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, where Mike gets the most credit. Go ahead and buy it. There's some different packages you can buy there where you buy all, a 3-pack of Mike's different books. Mike has given me the permission to read a little portion, just a very small portion at the end of the book. So if you haven't had a chance to pick up Profit First and you're wondering why should you pick it up, here is the reason why you should pick up Profit First. Such a cool opportunity to just share this idea. So I'm reading from Profit First, page 188 by Mike Michalowicz, again, published by Portfolio Penguin. And here we go. So Mike asked you to take action. Get real with your accountant. We all have our CPA. We all have our accountant. Depending on when you're listening to this, you might be right in the middle of putting your, profit and loss statements together. Sit down with your accountant, bookkeeper, or coach, ideally all three, preferably a profit first professional or a PFP trained in this system, and come up with a game plan to ensure that you don't end up allocating too much revenue to your profit account and you do allocate enough to your tax account. Schedule quarterly check-ins to make sure that you're consistently building up your profit and other allocations while reducing your operating expenses. And if for any reason whatsoever you have not yet set up profit first at the bank, for the sake of all that is holy, do it now. Follow the lead of Claudio Santos, who emailed me from South Africa just as I was typing the final words in this chapter and said, "Just started with your book. Can't seem to put it down. Anyway, just following your instructions and doing what you said," end quote. Claudio opened his account and sent me an email to tell me about it, just as I asked you to do in chapter 1. I strongly suspect he is about to see positive turn in his profits. That's it. Just do it. Just do it. Mike Michalowicz reminds us. Next part is the epilogue. And this was something that I was reading quite literally on my birthday of this year. And I wrote down at 5:50 in the morning, "Your birthday present to you, question mark." Here's what I read. It says epilogue. And again, I'm reading out of Profit First by Mike Michalowicz, the revised and expanded version. Portfolio Penguin is the publisher, giving credit where credit is absolutely due. Go buy that book, buy loads of it, give it to friends. And again, Portfolio Penguin published that book in 2014 and then revisited, remastered it, revised and expanded it in 2017. All right, epilogue. Rick Barry is one of the greatest foul shooters of all time. He is a 12-time NBA All-Star and member of the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. His free throw record is 89.3%. In the NBA, the average is 75%, and many players miss half the time. Two of the greatest basketball players of all time, Shaquille O'Neal and Wilt Chamberlain, had a free throw percentage of less than 53%. And both missed more than 5,000 free throw attempts over the course of their careers. How did Barry sink so many free throws? How did Rick Barry do it? He shot granny style, underhanded. The underhand shot, ironically, is not with the hands under the basketball. The shooter's hands grip the sides of the ball, with the ball held down about waist high. Then the shot is made by swinging the arms up, throwing the ball forward between your legs, just like granny. Two interesting things happen. First, the arm movement is greatly simplified. As opposed to the overhand shot that requires a coordination of a lot more joints, read that as more variables, Mike says in parentheses. The underhand shot keeps the arms locked and the wrists cocked. Read that as fewer variables, locked and cocked. The result is a much more consistent shot. The other part is that it puts much more backspin on the ball, allowing it to land with better placement. If it hits the rim, it bounces vertically more often, which allows the ball to stay near the rim and means it is more likely to fall in. If you try and stick with a Rick Barry granny style shot, your free throw shot percentage will increase dramatically. And yet you probably wouldn't do it in front of your buddies. College and pro basketball players adopting granny style, question mark? Hell no. Even though the most elite players are being paid millions to score points, and using the granny style will even help them score more points, pro players don't take advantage of it. The fear of looking stupid or inexperienced wins out over logic, which tells the players that the underhand shot will give them a higher success rate. It might also help them get into record books. You see, Wilt Chamberlain, the guy with the meager free throw percentage, became a legend, in part when he scored a record-breaking 100 points for the Philadelphia Warriors over the New York Knicks in 1962. He did it by scoring more free throw points. In fact, he broke a free throw record in that game. How did he do it? In that game, Chamberlain shot free throws Granny style. Who knew that Granny was such a badass? I wish I could shoot like good old Granny. Scratch that. I wish I'd kept shooting like her, parentheses, because I did when I was a little kid, close parentheses, and never became too cool to compromise points. Lesson learned, Grandma. I will never be too cool to score more points and never, ever too cool to compromise profit, even if no one else is putting profit first. I couldn't be more thrilled that profit first is catching on big time. But chances are you're still the first of your friends to implement profit first. And just as good friends would behave when you are the first to try something new, they might mock you. Welcome to the granny shot of accounting and money management. Profit first. By implementing it, the odds for success and fulfillment in business are now in your favor. But those unfamiliar with the system, it might appear to be an awkward or overly simplistic approach to accounting and bookkeeping. As you walk up to your own free throw line, the bank, and open up a bunch of accounts that you now know will change your life, you may hear snicker and taunts. That's okay. Just like Barry, you know it works. And you're in good company. Daily, literally every single day, I receive at least 5 or 6 emails from people who have read Profit First telling me how it helped them turn their businesses around. That's just email. I also consistently get Facebook posts, tweets, snail mail, believe it or not, and calls, and some people have even written articles about their Profit First success stories. Some stories I shared with you in this book, others I share in my keynote addresses, some folks I interview on my Profit First podcast. And all of them are saved or photographed